Good evening, everyone. I'll call to order the June 19th meeting of the Arvada City Council, and we'll call upon Councilmember Don Allard.
Would you please join me in a moment of silent reflection? And now the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kristen Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Allard.
Here. Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
Councilmember McGough.
Here. Next, we have the minutes of the June 5th, 2017 meeting. Are there any changes, corrections? Seeing none, they will stand approved as presented. Next, we have a couple of recognitions, and we'll call upon the Arvada Police Department by the Special Olympics Colorado Group. Do we have a representative from Special Olympics? Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having us today.
Thrilled.
Do I face this way or I'm going to face
No, you face this way.
Okay, good.
Go to the microphone and
Good.
introduce yourselves, and we'll have officer come down.
Thanks so much for having us. Jan Gordon with Special Olympics Colorado, and this is Allison Hess, and she is one of our athletes for Special Olympics. And today we just wanted to recognize our Arvada Police Department for all they do. I don't know if you all know, but law enforcement, they're our largest grassroots fundraisers for Special Olympics. Last year, worldwide, law enforcement raised $55 million for Special Olympics worldwide. So not just a little fundraiser, but they are really our base and our grassroots biggest volunteer group that we have. Here in Colorado, we raised $840,000 last year for our athletes. We have over 22,000 athletes here in Colorado, and so we've got 22 different sports. We're very busy with athletes and in schools and with our healthy athlete programs. And so tonight, we wanted to recognize our Arvada PD. And if it's okay, we'll have Allison talk a little bit about her life and how Special Olympics has changed it, and then we'll go ahead and present to Officer Gagan, okay? Thank you. Allison?
Good evening. I'm here today on behalf of Special Olympics Colorado to extend an invitation for you to become involved in a life-changing experience for thousands throughout the state. Special Olympics provides opportunities for those with developmentally disabilities who would otherwise have none. Let me tell you what my life was like before I joined Special Olympics Colorado. Life in elementary school was fairly normal. Little kids do not easily recognize someone as developmentally disabled. I laughed and played with everyone. When I moved on to middle school, it was a different story. No one wanted to talk with me. I walked the halls alone. My freshman and sophomore years in high school were no improvement. I did not understand why I was not allowed to play on the school's basketball team, so I tried to participate in other things. They even made fun of me in choir. While classmates were busy with friends, I was home doing nothing. Loneliness and boredom were my daily routine. In my junior year, my mom found Special Olympics. Life began to unfold. Even though no one wanted me on their team when I was in high school, I now feel like a valuable member of all of my Special Olympics sports teams. I have met many of the people I call my friends through Special Olympics Colorado. I'm proud to say I have been a year-round athlete, participating in skiing, bowling, swimming, basketball, and softball. Once during a basketball game, I hit a clean net shot from beyond the three-point line, and yes, the crowd went wild. Thanks to Special Olympics Colorado, what was once loneliness and boredom has sometimes become a full schedule of speaking, sports, and other activities. I'm now a global messenger, a special athlete who presents speeches around the state on behalf of all people with intellectual disabilities. Special Olympics didn't simply change my life, it gave me life. Unless you have experienced loneliness, boredom, total isolation, and lack of acceptance from the society the way I have, you might not know how important Special Olympics Colorado is. There is no doubt the experience of effort, teamwork, and athletic success have a positive effect on how we athletes view ourselves. Thanks to Special Olympics, we approach life knowing we can achieve. We have social lives we would not otherwise have. I speak for those nearly 22,000 special athletes statewide when I say we would appreciate your help making a difference in our lives. What can we offer in exchange for your support? You might be surprised. Ask us about patience. We know about patience. Ask us how to keep going after you've fallen so very many times. Some of us are experts. We can help you learn compassion. We can show you the rewards of being a volunteer. We can teach you the power of love. We are all part of the success story at Special Olympics Colorado, where together we learn how to share the success of others and have come to know the only limitations we have are those we accept. It is therefore with gratitude I say thank you for inviting us to speak to you, and I invite you to be involved with this great cause. Thank you.
Thanks for letting her share her story with y'all. And Arvada, if Officer Gagin come forward, please. Chief Wick is not able to be here tonight, but it's great that Officer Gagin's here because he really has turned this agency around. I met with Chief Wick about a year and a half ago, and he said, you know, we love to do the torch run, because that's one of the events we do, but then we like to get involved with some other things. And between Detective Shear and Officer Gagin, they now do the torch run, they do the polar plunge, they do the Tip-A-Cop event, they do a choir event in Arvada where they pull 4 to 5 schools together, 4 schools together, and they have a big choir sing-off. I mean, they have gotten so involved with us, and they're one of our top fundraising agencies, and they've just done a great job. So we wanted to be sure to present in front of you to let you know all that they're doing. So thank you so much for all that you do, and thanks for letting Allison share her story with y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very inspirational. Next, we have the Pickleball Association that would like to recognize the city. We have a representative from the Pickleball. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I am Pickleball Ken Markwart, and we have part of the pickleball community here. And we're here to thank the city of Arvada for their support for the 2016 Pickleball for Heroes tournament. And that is for the Colorado veterans with traumatic brain injury. Operation TBI Freedom is 100% privately funded organization and sponsored by Craig Hospital, which is a 501c3 organization, and OTF services more than 1,200 Colorado veterans and their family annually. Last year, Pickleball for Heroes tournament had 300 players, and with the help of the city of Arvada, we raised over $70K, and 100% of that money went to the Colorado veterans, and there's not many organizations that give 100%. We take nothing out for administration. For you that don't know about pickleball, I would love to have you go to our website, pickleballken.org, page down to Pickleball Channel, and they did a segment on us, and pop on the video icon, and it will show you how pickleball has changed lives. And we have 18 people that have Parkinson. One of the gals, if she doesn't play 4 times a week, she starts getting the shakes. And we also have one of our veterans that tells a story there. He died twice. He died once in Iran, and they brought him back, and then he was in Castle Rock, and they also brought him back. And that's what TBI, traumatic brain injury, does. We are proud to have the best 24 outdoor courts in the United States, but again, I always undersell, so they're actually better. That's at 82nd and Sims, the Apex at Sims Street, and we are proud to have that facility in Arvada. Now I would like to present a plaque, and I'm assuming I give it to you, Mr. Mayor.
Come down. Let's get it right.
Probably would help if it would go up.
Here, how about like that?
That's super.
Good.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Congratulations. You know, I hadn't heard much about pickleball until my next door neighbor, Bob and Dottie West, they're like fanatics, and it's like, I think there's an addiction that goes on with pickleball, but I think it's a great sport, and Arvada seems to be right in the forefront of having some great courts, and it's a great way to keep people involved and get that good, healthy lifestyle. So thank you, Pickleball Ken, and thank you for what you're doing for the Pickleball for Heroes program. Next, we have public comment on issues not scheduled on the agenda. The first we have, and we do a 3-minute limit on these, Mary Jo Giddings. Good evening, Mary Jo.
Good evening. I'm here to invite you and our viewers to attend the Arvada Historical Society's 7th annual garden tour. It'll be this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The tickets for this self-guided tour are available up at the Arvada Center that morning. They are $15 each, no credit cards, please. And all funds raised will be used by the Historical Society to preserve Arvada's rich history and make it accessible to the public. Once you buy your ticket, you will get a description of each of the gardens and also a map. And you may take them in any order that you please. They're all definitely here in Arvada. There are 6 beautiful residential gardens and 1 community garden. The Reed Court neighborhood has 7 gardens that they put together for a community garden. So we've not had one quite like that before. Once you get out there, you'll see all sorts of good ideas. You'll see perennials, you'll see garden art, water features, a secret garden, a pergola, climbing vines. And on site will be the garden host to answer questions that you might have about what you see growing there. Light refreshments will be offered at many of the gardens, so you can enjoy that too. As you're out in your own neighborhood and district, if you see a garden that is really special and that catches your eye, pass it on to us, because we're always looking. So far, we have showcased 49 gardens all here in Arvada, and we know there are lots and lots more. Mark McGough has given us some names in the past of gardens that we have showcased. And we thank Bob Pfeiffer for promoting us in his newsletter this year, promoting the garden tour. There's a lot going on this weekend, but we hope you'll find some time to come out for the garden tour. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Thanks for your work with the Historical Society and what they all do in terms of helping us hold on to our history and while we continue to enjoy all the things that make Arvada great. I'll call on Chris Kimmerly.
Thank you. My name is Chris Kimmerly. I live at 12563 West 75th Place in Arvada. I'm a real estate developer myself, and I own 3 rental properties in Arvada. I'm here to discuss the 9-acre property that previously owned by Electra Products, bought by RTD and AURA, the Arvada Urban Redevelopment Authority, then sold to a developer for $30. The property is worth at least $4.3 million and probably closer to $5.8 million according to the Jeffco assessors. In response to the question, isn't Trammell Crow getting a sweetheart deal? Your official response was that the company was spending $70 million and Aura had to discount the property and make the project financially feasible. The Jeffco assessor's office valued this 9-acre property at $5.8 million. The proposed 280-unit apartment complex stands to bring in $6 to $8.5 million a year in net revenue. If Trammell Crow paid the $5.8 million market value for that property, they could have made that money back in less than a year. In response to your question, if it's worth so much, why would Aura give the property away for $30? Your response was, the developer had to spend $13 million on retaining walls and parking garage, and the project requires no surface parking for residential. Since when is it the government's responsibility to ensure a healthy profit for a developer or any business for that matter? Is it fair that numerous businesses across Arvada won't get tax breaks from the city? Exactly what is the profit potential that the mayor and Aura had to give to entice real estate developers to build a high-density complex? We, the citizens of Arvada, the taxpayers, we're not against change, okay? You've done great things for the city. What we are united against is seeing our property taxes go skyrocketing every 2 years. Then you tell big corporations that they don't have to pay property taxes. You tell them that we will foot the bill. Corporations like Trammell Crow, Walmart, and the Hilton. Meanwhile, you tell us you need to raise taxes because our roads are in disrepair. You tell us you don't have enough revenue for our children's schools. And then you're shocked when we vote those tax increases down. I'd like to hear an official response. You know, exactly what is the profit potential that's required for these developers? It doesn't make any sense to me. I checked with the apartment complex on the other side of the railroad tracks, and market rents and cash-on-cash returns, you know, easily are outrageous for giving this property away. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'd like to see the city shut this project down, and it's just not worth it.
Okay, thank you for your comments, sir. Anyone else wish to address City Council during public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. We'll move on to new business. We have several items on the consent agenda. The first is 17061, a resolution authorizing an agreement between Arvada and Children's Play Structures and Recreation for the replacement of playground equipment at the Stingner Sports Complex Playground in an amount not to exceed approximately $219,000. The next item is a resolution authorizing a construction contract between Arvada and T&M Construction in the amount of approximately $284,000 for the Carr Street sidewalk improvements. Third one's a resolution authorizing a change order to the crossing agreements by and between Arvada and Union Pacific Railroad Company pertaining to quiet zones on Lamar Street, Carr Street, Old Wadsworth Boulevard, and West 66th Avenue in the amount of $431,000. Fourth one is a resolution authorizing the issuance of a purchase order to Hanan Equipment Company in an amount not to exceed approximately $115,000 for the purchase of one 2017 John Deere 410L backhoe loader. Fifth item is a resolution authorizing the issuance of a purchase order to Corf Continental in an amount not to exceed approximately $329,000 for the purchase of 6 2017 Ford F-350 utility trucks and 2 2017 Ford 350 dump trucks. And the final item on the consent agenda is a resolution accepting annexation petitions concerning Trinity Storage, 15350 State Highway 72, finding said petitions substantially compliant with State Statute 3112-107, and setting a public hearing for August 7th, 2017, 6:30 p.m. at Arvada City Hall for City Council to determine whether the area described therein meets the requirements of State Statute 3112-104 and 105 and are considered eligible for annexation. It's my understanding there was a minor typo in an address on that, and that has been corrected. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that consent items number R 17-061 through 17-066 be approved. And I just need to make one comment before I vote. The second item on today's consent agenda is Resolution R 17-062, refers to a resolution for a construction contract for Carr Street Sidewalk project. As part of this project, the city needed to and has acquired some property from me, and I recused myself from every action with regard to property acquisition for this item. This, however, being just the construction contract, I feel I have no conflict, so I will not be asking to be recused and will be voting on this motion as well as all these other resolutions.
Thank you. All votes cast. Consent agenda passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance on first reading. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, an ordinance enacting, Council Bill 17-020, an ordinance enacting Article 3 fire restrictions or bans of Chapter 42 Fire Prevention and Protection of the City of Arvada City Code and establish penalties for violation thereof. Public hearing to be set for July 17, 2017 at 6:30 p.m.
Motions for approval on first reading. All votes cast. That passes 7-0. We're actually moving along quite well, so we can't start our public hearings yet. I'll open it up for any reports from City Council. Mr. Pfeiffer.
I just want to report to Council that earlier this month I did visit with the FCC in Washington, D.C., and it was some good progress in regards to what they call video direct calling. So the idea is to get rid of like TYY, where we actually have interpreters, or not really have interpreters between the users of the service. And it was fascinating to see the push. And in fact, I'm on a subcommittee to talk about that a little bit more, and the staff's been very helpful in helping me understand how we handle those citizens and visitors that have either hearing or visual impairment, and how do we make sure that they have equal access to the services that the city has. And so what's interesting with it is that in the next 4 months, it's a free service that the FCC has, and they're looking for areas for people to try the service. I'm going to be exploring with the city if that's something we can participate in with the Northwest Indian tribes, because they would be the other end of the users. So they don't have access to those services, and maybe there's a collaboration that we can do. So that is an interesting twist, and maybe Dr. Cog can weigh in with the area on aging. So right now I'm just exploring with staff on what that could look like.
Great. Thanks for your work on that. David Jones.
I too just wanted to give a quick update on my trip to Washington, D.C. last week as we met with Department of Transportation, with the FAA, and actually William Kirkland, who's a special assistant to the administration, to the president on transportation, with regard specifically about the Jefferson Parkway. And some of the, I guess, roadblocks, or I don't know if you'd call it roadblocks, but the FAA and the challenges that they've put...
Speed bumps.
There you go. Speed bumps that they've put in front of us as it relates to the runway protection zone, where the Jefferson Parkway will come through, which ironically, Highway 128 also goes through that same runway protection zone. So they were great meetings, and they're committed to helping us understand the position that the FAA has taken. The new deputy administrator for the FAA was in our meeting and was committed to getting to a resolution quickly. So it was a great meeting, and I was happy to be there.
And David, I'm really pleased that you went back. And we've discovered over the years that sometimes we have to get in their face. And you did that on this issue. Mark Devon did it on a railway crossing issue some time back. We've certainly done it on Gross Reservoir, where we've gotten back there and rattled some cages, and it's been successful in terms of trying to get some issues dealt with. And this is an important one for our community, and I appreciate you. And I know Commissioner Don Rozier and Libby Sabo were both back there as well. And we're understanding that there's a desire to get more infrastructure dollars out, and we certainly have a project that would be appropriate.
It fits well within what they're hoping to accomplish in situations like this. So very good meetings.
Great. Any other council reports at this point? Nancy Ford. I thought I saw you out of the corner of my eye reach it, but I didn't see a light yet. Yes.
Well, Councilmember Marriott and I had an opportunity to participate in a session on Thursday where the Old Town Bid members gave a lot of, and other participants gave some great feedback on Old Town and where it's going and where it is today. And I thought it was very, very informative, and I enjoyed it immensely. I also had an opportunity to be at the Arvada Center when they were awarded a gift from one of our corporations, Excel, and that was a very exciting day. And Saturday night, I said this on my Facebook account, I went to see a performance of Denver artists at the Arvada Center, and it was absolutely fantastic. I'm continually amazed at the great performances that we have at the Arvada Center, so I encourage citizens to try it out.
Very good. Okay, it is now 6:30. Thank you for those reports. I'll open the public hearing on Council Bill 17019, an ordinance amending various sections of Article 3, Sales and Use Tax of Chapter 98, Taxation of the Arvada City Code. Mr. Devon?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to have Brian Archer, or I'm sorry, I guess Ezekiel, or both of you, both of members of our
tag team presentation?
Tag team presentation on this ordinance that's before you tonight.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Tonight we're following up with you on an item that we brought to first reading on June 5th. This item addresses proposed amendments to the city's sales and use tax ordinance. The proposed changes would incorporate a set of standard sales and use tax definitions that was developed by a committee of home rule cities. As you know, home rule cities rely heavily on sales and use taxes. In Arvada, 66% of our general fund revenues come from sales and use taxes. However, Colorado is one of only a few states where home rule cities have the authority to set their own tax base. We can determine what's taxable and not taxable. We can collect taxes directly from businesses, and we can audit businesses directly. There are currently 69 home rule municipalities in Colorado. And if you're a business that operates in several cities, then you not only need to be aware of what's taxable in each city, you also need to be aware of what the different licensing requirements are, and you need to be aware of what words might have different meanings in the different cities' tax codes. As you can imagine, this can become very burdensome for businesses. Consequently, in 2014, the Colorado General Assembly issued Senate Joint Resolution 1438, asking the Colorado Municipal League to develop a set of standard sales and use tax definitions so that home rule cities can incorporate these definitions into their tax codes and all have the same definitions. After the General Assembly issued this joint resolution, the Colorado Municipal League convened a committee of home rule municipalities, and each municipality had one member represent them on the committee. The primary goal of this committee was to develop a set of definitions that was revenue neutral. These definitions could not increase or decrease any city's tax base. After several meetings and several discussions in late 2016, the committee finalized these definitions. The definitions were then reviewed by representatives from the business community and home rule municipal attorneys. There are many business and industry organizations that have supported this effort. In your packets, we included a list of these organizations. The final definitions have been incorporated into 9 different municipalities' tax codes. And the goal is to have all 69 home rule municipalities incorporate these definitions. So tonight we're bringing these changes forward. And Mr. Devon or Mr. Archer, do you have anything else to add? Okay. Any questions?
Well, I'm going to open it up for public comment. I've got a couple of people who have signed up. And I'll call first upon State Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp. Good evening, Representative.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councilors. I'm Tracy Kraft-Tharp. I'm the state representative for House District 29, which is North and East Arvada, the Jefferson County part of Westminster. So I'm here tonight to ask for your support for Ordinance 17019 around sales and use tax definitions. So I was one of the prime sponsors of the resolution with the General Assembly 14038 requesting that Colorado Municipal League and the municipalities come together to be able to standardize their definitions around sales tax terms. This is the foundational work for further work. As you know, as you have probably heard, that our businesses are struggling. And our businesses are struggling with having to remit often to 20 different sources of sales tax. For a small business, that can take hours and hours each month. For a large business, that American Home Furniture Warehouse, I think it says, I've heard that they take about a day and a half to be able to remit to all their sales tax. That's not okay here in Colorado. That's not okay in our municipalities. So I really want to commend you all for the work that you've done. Standardizing our definitions is the foundational work to be able to streamline our sales tax remittal process. This last year, we passed, and the governor signed 2 weeks ago, House Bill 1216, which I was a prime sponsor of. House Bill 1216 pulls together a task force to be able to look at this streamlining sales tax issues. So home rule cities, statutory cities, and businesses will come together, as well as legislators, and I've been appointed to serve on that committee, to be able to look at how can Colorado streamline this process to make it both fair process for our municipalities, but also an efficient and effective process for our businesses. So this is important work. I'm asking for your support. I want to commend you for all the hard work that you've done, and your staff has been very involved in this process and have worked really hard. So I want to thank you, and thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Representative. Next, Edward Rothschild.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I too wanted to voice my support, and hopefully you will support this resolution. It is the beginning of the process. I know I've had discussions with a number of you.
A lot of arm twisting, Mr. Rothschild.
I'm a small business. We have 20-something employees, and I fill out better than a half a dozen sales tax reports on a monthly basis. Not the most productive thing. Again, I appreciate the support on this resolution. It really is the first step of hopefully simplifying the sales tax system in the state of Colorado. I know it's a tough problem with home rule, but hopefully we'll get to the point where we can have a consolidated system, and I think in the long run it's good for business, especially small business, and I think it's good for the communities because you'll have easier enforcement, and I think you'll have better compliance. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to testify for or against on this public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public testimony and open it up for City Council questions or action. Mr. Pfeiffer.
If there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Ms. Ford, did you have a question? No. Okay. You may proceed.
I move that Council Bill 17-019, an ordinance amending various sections of Article 3 Sales and Use Tax of Chapter 98, Taxation of the Arvada City Code, be approved on final reading number 4596 and ordered published by title only.
Okay, Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment on the motion. I would urge everybody to vote yes on this. I think this is terribly important, not just for the city of Arvada, but cities in general. As most of the public knows, a large portion of our budget is derived from sales tax revenues. And as time moves on, more and more sales are done online. And while this is not a change that makes sales tax on online sales mandatory, it does help set the framework where it can be done. It's clear with Amazon going to paying in state and local sales taxes that that's where it's going. And it's absolutely important that we, as a regulating authority, are cooperative and help make it easy on them as well. And I think this is a good first step. And I'd like to thank and commend Mr. Rothschild and Representative Kraft-Tharp for help spearheading this and pushing it forward, and state that how important this is for not just the city of Arvada, but all cities in general.
Now, I'll echo Mr. Marriott's words, and really am very appreciative of the work together that's going on between the Municipal League, the business community, city staffs from cities large and small to look at the situation. Clearly there's a problem, and coming up with things that work better. I agree that this is the start. This is not the finish line, and there's more work to be done, but this is a good first step. I thank the legislature for getting something passed, and I'm very appreciative of everybody coming together and sitting down and talking about it. So with that, all votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Congratulations, Mr. Rothschild. You're getting a picture of that for your scrapbook. Very good. Mr. Archer?
I would like to add one more item. Ms. Kraft-Thorpe made mention of Task Bill 1216. The City of Arvada is lucky enough to be one of the nominees from CML to be one of the 4 members that is going to sit on that committee from a city and county's perspective. So we got the large city nominee. So hopefully we'll be accepted, and if we are, we will continue to be a part of this moving forward.
Very good. I know there's some other cities that are lobbying for that as well, so we'll see how it plays out. Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing on Candelas Townhomes Preliminary Development Plan, northeast corner of Howlett and State Highway 72. Same time, we'll consider the Candelas Townhomes Preliminary Plat, northeast corner of Howlett and State Highway 72. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll have Director of Community Development, Rita McConnell, introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. The original Candelas Townhomes proposal was presented to City Council on March 20th, 2017, and was denied by a vote of 3-3 with 1 absent. Planning Commission voted 4 in favor with 2 absent on this original request. A revised proposal was submitted to address council's concerns about the parking, drive aisle widths, and pedestrian routes for school children. An additional neighborhood meeting was held to discuss this revised submittal. The proposal is now for 104 townhome units, a decrease in 3 of the units. All land development code requirements are met and even exceeded in some cases. For example, there are an addition of 40 more guest parking spaces above the 52 that were required. The inclusion of HOA restrictions on the use of the parking garages, and the requirement for installation of pedestrian safety devices in front of the school. Staff finds the proposal in conformance with the comprehensive plan and the land development code. The request also supports City Council strategic results related to diverse housing. I have received the affidavit of mailing and posting log, and they are in order. Senior Planner Carol Ibanez and Traffic Engineers John Ferruzzi and Sylvia Lopo are present for staff questions. The applicant, Mr. Carl Nelson, and his team are in attendance for his presentation.
Very good. The affidavit and posting log will be made part of the record. If everybody wishes to testify on this matter, raise your right hand. Do you all swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Very good. You may proceed.
Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, it's my pleasure to be back before you tonight. We're very excited about the application we have before you. With myself, I have a larger team with me that helps to put this package together. I would like to thank Rita and her team. They've worked with us. You guys have a great staff that works with you and advocates on behalf of all of the city of Arvada. With me tonight is Curtis Joseph with JR Engineering. He's our civil engineer. We also have Randy Duzan with Stanley. He's our planner of record. We have Jeff Hodson with LSC, which is our traffic engineer. We also have Alex Duran with Gunn Sudik, which helped us with product. Additionally, Cindy Myers and Brian Mulqueen are here with Century Communities, and behind me is Brian Daly, who is part of the master developer, or is the master developer for all of Candelas.
And if you would, for the record, reintroduce
Address.
yourself and your address.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. Carl Nelson, 26010 East Euclid Drive, Aurora, 80016.
Very good.
Bear with me while I try to figure out the clicker.
It's pain. Nobody figures it out the first time.
There we go. I somehow got
Yes,
it.
you passed.
So, Century Communities has been a home builder within Colorado. We are a local home builder. We build in Colorado, but we're also a national home builder. We got our start in Colorado. We've been building in Colorado for the last 15 years. We build both single-family detached and attached housing. And attached is one of the things from a statutory perspective you see a lot of builders shying away from, which has created a mix issue in Colorado, but that's something Century's excelled at over the last 15 years. If you look at the product that we proposed on this project, it's for sale two-story townhomes with alley-loaded garages, which will be complementary to the surrounding streets. It is compatible to the existing architectural styles within the overall Candelas community. And if you look at the three elevation styles, they were inspired by the overall Candelas, which has contemporary craftsman and farmhouse styles. There are 4 distinct building configurations that all have porches that wrap around the side of the building, which create a very good feel to not only our community within a community, but the overall community. We have a blend of materials on our buildings that include a mix of 4-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch lap siding with both brick, stone, and stucco. There are gabled roofs, and if you look at the roofs in general, there are different roof articulations that occur, not only on the front and the rear of the buildings, but they also occur on the sides of the building. So we are providing 360-degree architecture, whether you're walking through the community or you're driving by the community. It will be very complementary not only to Candelas, but the overall city of Arvada. Our heights are consistent with the single-family detached homes, which help to ensure that this is a compatible use to the surrounding neighborhood. Oop, I lied. Thought I had the clicker figured out. We have windows on all sides, and again, we have 360-degree elevations. We have extensive articulation and varied massing of both front and rear facades. This project is a use by right. It is an approved use within the Candelas Outline Development Plan, Amendment Number 2. This second amendment was approved in 2011 and really transferred the school site, the amendment transferred the school site and this use between the two parcels. The criteria for this parcel is it's 10.5 acres, it's zoned PUD-R for 107 townhomes, and building height restrictions are 35 feet. You'll notice within your staff report, the staff report says that the building heights are 28 feet, but the overall site is limited to 35 feet. The overall community, to the north of this project, there's a 10-acre community park, pool, and open space. To the south of the project, there's Highway 72. To the east of the project, there's Jefferson County's K-8 school, and to the west are single-family homes. This project in itself provides a normal transition from the school and the highway to the overall neighborhood, and is why it was contemplated in the ODP to begin with, and why subsequently those two sites were transferred. We have gone through to get here tonight, we've gone through a process. If you look at our first neighborhood meeting, we had 117 townhomes with 3 to 8 homes per building. We had a centralized pocket park, and we had 58 guest parking. This was what we showed at our original neighborhood meeting. At our next neighborhood meeting, and on the next slide you can see the plan, but on our next neighborhood meeting we showed 107 townhomes, and based on community feedback, based on staff feedback, we reduced our overall unit count down to 107 townhomes. There's only 6 homes per building. We increased the setback along the collector streets. We also moved the park from a centralized location to being adjacent to the community park, which gave, as you're walking or driving down the road, it gave a very complimentary feel on both sides of that road. We still had 58 guest parking spaces, which met the city requirement of 1/2 space per unit. I'll give you a second to look at the plan, and then I'll move on. We currently are showing 104 townhomes. So that's down from our first submittal of 117, down from our second submittal or second neighborhood meeting of 107. And you can see this this current plan, you can see the park to the north of the project, provides a buffer to the community park. We increased the buffer along Highway 72, as you can see, and increased the buffer to the adjacent collector road. We've also added pedestrian connectivity over to the school. If you look at the overall plan, this plan as it sits today has 49% open space and landscape. That's well over and above the 20% required per city code. We have a 100-foot buffer to State Highway 72. We have a 40-foot buffer to the collector streets, plus a tree lawn. We have detached sidewalk all around the site, and we have internal courtyards that encourage pedestrian connectivity not only through our site, but around our site, and will allow people a very nice experience along with our architecture as they may go through our property or to the school, or ultimately to the amenity within the community. We have increased our parking, as Rita eloquently pointed out earlier. We have 91 guest parking spaces today. That is 69% more than required by city code. It's 0.9 guest spaces per home. We have shown on this slide in pink the guest parking spaces that are within the community today. This is our main thoroughfare, our private road. If you look at the previous plan, that runs from Howlett Street to West 94th, kind of highlighted on the sides there in pink. It is a 34-foot flow line to flow line section, as opposed to the remainder of the Candelas local roads that today are 28 feet curb to curb with on-street parking. We have submitted this plan to the City of Arvada Fire Protection District for approval and review. They have given to us their largest Arvada Fire Protection District Truck 56, and we've shown safe movements throughout the site. And again, this has been reviewed by Arvada Fire Department and approved by them. We have also added, based on comments that we received previously, 2 rapid flash beacons, which I understand are called rectangular rapid flash beacons. But we certainly want to make sure that we have safe pedestrian movements adjacent to our site, through our site, and around our site. And we worked with the master developer and staff to understand a location that worked for these rectangular rapid flash beacons. But this should provide safe pedestrian access from the overall master trail system of Candelas, hopefully to the K through 8 school. And we've also added, as we talked about earlier, a pedestrian trail kind of on the southeast side of our site that should connect into the school overall sidewalk system. At our last meeting, we heard some concern about how the HOA would handle parking, or guest parking, if you will, or garage parking. And so we want to make it very clear, this is our typical language that is in our CC&Rs and our design guidelines. Each home will have 2 car garages. The covenants will contain the following language, and I'll read it to you. I want to be respectful of your time, but I'll read it explicitly so that we have it for the
fix
record.
the typo that's in the paragraph there. Parking of 2 TWO, not TO, automobiles in each garage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Garages shall be used for parking automobiles and other motor vehicles only, and shall not be converted for habitable living space or for storage, which prevents the parking of TWO automobiles in each garage. The Board of Directors is hereby authorized to enforce this regulation through the enforcement policy contained within the rules and regulations of the Homeowner Association and in accordance with Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, as you guys probably know, KIOA. So what we would expect is our board to enforce this, and what ends up happening is, as you guys know, as you're enforcing different regulations within your jurisdiction, it takes many eyes to find people that are transgressing against the rules. And so what ends up happening is someone can call in anonymously, to the board, make a note of someone that's doing something wrong, and then the board has the ability to take enforcement action, which includes starting to fine a homeowner for violating these rules. We thought it was important to illustrate our traffic impact from this project. As we worked with the surrounding community, we heard some concerns about how our project may impact the overall traffic. So you can see along Howlett there and along State Highway 72, our project overall would have a 14% impact in the year 2035 relative to the existing traffic volumes on that road. You can see that the site-generated traffic and then the background traffic is shown at the top of the box, and then the middle of the box, the total is the gray box highlighted down below. There may be questions on this. I'll give you a second to look at it. There's a lot of numbers on there. But you can see as you work north of the community, the impact of our traffic patterns reduced significantly. This was prepared and reviewed by City of Arvada's traffic engineer and was prepared by our third-party traffic engineer. Thought it would be good for Mr. Mayor and Council to see how this project could conceptually look as it was constructed out. This isn't terribly far from how it would look, save for vegetation may change. This project's pre-planned, so we would anticipate a lot of the architecture, a lot of the buildings will look exactly like this. This is a view on Howlett Street, looking back at our project. This is a view at the roundabout near the community park, looking east. This is a view along West 94th, looking southwest. And this is a view along the internal private street that runs through the center of the project. This is a view along a west courtyard looking east. So ultimately, in summary, we are in conformance with the 2014 comprehensive plan. We adhere to land use goal L5, which provides, we shall designate and promote redevelopment and infill to generate economic revitalization, improve physical condition, and provide an appropriate mix of quality housing choices. Being an attached builder, this is something that's generally attractive to jurisdictions today, as there aren't a lot of builders building attached. Candelas is part of the Northwest Arvada Targeted Redevelopment Area. The Community Character Goal CC1 provides Plan Arvada as a city of different development character districts. We conform with that as we're different than the surrounding community, but we are a use by right that is approved within the overall development. Community Character Goal CC 1.1 further provides the city will include a variety of development types, including rural areas, suburban residential neighborhoods, historic districts, redevelopment areas, and mixed-use communities that contain services, employment, and higher density housing. Candelas Townhomes is a use that is contemplated in the comprehensive plan and approved under the outline development plan. With that, what this slide illustrates is our conformance with the outline development plan and city code standards and specifications. Our ODP criteria, as discussed earlier, I won't go too far into that. We have 107 dwelling units in the ODP. We're looking to have approved tonight, hopefully, 104 units. Our parking is 2.5 spaces per unit. We've actually proposed 2.9 spaces per unit. We have, there's a contradiction with the staff report, which says 300. Through the process of the original submittal to tonight, we converted one to an ADA space, which lost us 1 unit, just so you guys know what that contradiction is. Park dedication, as we talked about earlier, we are exceeding the overall park dedication significantly. School dedication was adhered to by the overall master development. Within the city's code standards specification, the Candelas Townhome project complies with city code standards and specifications. We are not requesting any variances tonight for approval. So we are meeting the ODP and we're meeting city code and standards and specifications. With that, I would conclude my presentation. I would request that you give us approval tonight, and I will be here for any questions, or our team will be here for any questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Thank you very much. I have a couple people who have signed up to speak. I'll call first upon Michelle Killeen. Did not request, I'm sorry, does not wish to speak, but enter name in the record against the issue. Next, I'll call upon, is it Aaron Botnick? Sorry. B-O-T-I-N-C-K? Okay. If you'll state your name and your address.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Aaron Botnick. I'm at 19896 West 94th Avenue in Arvada. I am located pretty close to the clubhouse that is currently serving the area where these townhomes will be built, and can actually see the site from my backyard, and front yard for that matter. So first off, I wanted to mention that there were several in our community who were unable to make it to this meeting that made the last meeting, who were all speaking against as well. I personally was unable to make the last neighborhood meeting, of which I saw on the record there were about 15 people that were pretty well against the issue as well. Among the issues that are still of concern, they've certainly tried to address some of the parking issues. You can see that they did add a couple of small parking areas here and there, with the vast majority still well away from the units. So there's that one. The fire truck model, I would mention, obviously assumes that nobody's illegally parking in the alleys, which where some of those smaller parking areas are, I'm guessing that's still going to be an issue. Let's see. The density issue still, I realize they've gone from 117 to 107 at the community's request, now down to 104. The rest of the community is somewhere a little bit below 3 dwelling units per acre, I believe. We're still hovering right around 10. I think most in the community would have been much happier if we were down closer to 6 to 7. Probably not as feasible, but that's where we would have liked to have seen it, between the recreation complex usage issues and the additional traffic. The sixplex buildings are still fairly large compared to even some of the larger single dwelling homes in the area. They made a specific mention about the 49% open space. If you notice their map, though, realizing fully that that's because of utility servitudes, gas lines, and whatnot, the vast majority of that is to the south, which means that the community at large is very compact relative to the full size of the space in the PDP. Especially it looks compact if you compare it to even the most tightly packed of the single dwelling homes in the area, the detached homes. There's still concern over how many of these units over time could turn into rental properties and how those issues would be dealt with as far as maintenance and that sort of thing as well. Already mentioned recreation facilities. There was some question in the early stages that there may have been a plan for 3 rec facilities, and that dropped to 2. We're already finding it pretty busy, and the single-family homes still haven't been fully built out yet. There's still the continuing question of disclosure. Apparently at the last community meeting, or neighborhood meeting, I should say, the developer mentioned again that that was on the builders. I would hope that the developer would have been in communication with the builders and tried to make a cohesive message. That apparently hadn't happened. I hope that that has changed today, given what we've been talking about for the last year now, for the remaining townhomes and condo units that are planned throughout the rest of Candelas where people haven't yet moved in. To that end, myself and at least several of my other neighbors probably would not have moved to the specific lots within the Parkview neighborhood had we known that the townhomes were going in where they were. As an example, we specifically did not choose to build on the east end of town, or on the east end of Candela, sorry, where the Jefferson Parkway is eventually supposed to go through. For the same reason, we would have picked a lot further back, perhaps, rather than right up front. One of the few benefits I'm seeing here is it'll block the view of the RV storage that's currently across Highway 72. Then there's still the question of traffic. They have mentioned certain issues with traffic and routing and whatnot. Obviously, on the north end, it's not expected to be particularly heavy from the townhomes, though I would anticipate school traffic to be quite heavy. The big issue with traffic we're all still concerned with is the traffic models, I assume, are looking at trips per day. What about the trip peak during commute times? How difficult is it going to be for us to get in and out of the neighborhood when commute times also happen to coincide with when school is going in and out, in addition to these 104 extra units? So those are the concerns again, a lot of rehash from last time, but thank you again for allowing us to speak.
Thank you, sir. Chris Wall.
Hello, my name is Chris Wall, and my address is 20137 West 95th Avenue, Arvada, Colorado 80007. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I do want to thank the folks for giving us the community meetings that we have been able to go to. I wanted to leave my remarks to kind of 2 subjects specific. One is the traffic, some of which we've spoken about. And a little specific to that flow, I think that a number of us would maybe like to see a few more crossings that are marked. It looks like there are 2 that looks like they're right next to where the model homes are and the schools are. It would probably be likely that we would see some crossing at that intersection where the Hallett Street is listed right there on the map for some of the community that would be walking, and very much so around the roundabout, which is currently where the bus stop is. So most are used to going to that. So that's a safety concern around, frankly, family and kids. So that's assuming this goes in at all. We definitely would like to see that. Larger flow issue that maybe is not related to the development, but might be worth considering at this juncture in time is the flow of traffic coming in on Hallett. If you look at the way the school has been designed and where the bus stop pullout is, it's on the school side of 94th, which will then drive the buses as well as many drivers through that intersection. I think in our community meeting, we kind of talked about a flow from all sorts of sides, which may be true. We also have the west side of Leiden Rock coming in. It's possible that they'll drive all the way down to Indiana and make a left turn against a signal to make another left turn against a signal onto 72 to then drive up west on Coal Creek Canyon to turn right. I'm wagering that the west end of that will more likely go straight up to 93, make a right turn. And one of the things we discussed is if you look at how much traffic is likely to be on 72 from 93, trying to make a left turn in to that very spot, we're likely to see a backup pretty fast. It fits about 6 cars. And then after that, it'll be in the direct line of a 1-lane road. So granted, that's not this development, and I understand it has more to do with the larger scope of CDOT and some other things as to when it might warrant infrastructure. But I'm thinking that we may see something, again, to Aaron's point, the overall percentages don't necessarily take into consideration the 20 to 30 minutes of everybody getting in, particularly in the morning. Out, it's varied a little bit, and I would agree with the traffic folks that timings vary at the end of school, not so much at the beginning. So my request was that even though these may not be directly associated with the development, that we may want to spend some time thinking those through before we approve a development like this. And then the last component was just rental, and it was a little bit vague at our meeting as to whether these units could become rentals in a 1-year period and whether that was a rule associated with the developer, associated with the city. I don't know the answer to either of those, but I think that there's been enough neighborhood thought that maybe a 2 to 3 year window would be more likely to keep them owner occupied. If somebody has to carry one of these properties at 300 plus grand, they're probably not likely to carry it for 2 or 3 years as an investment property, but more likely to be an owner. We're obviously interested in more owners. And that sums up my comments, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, is it Jeb Benson? Good evening, Mr. Benson.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You know, tall guys, we're always afraid of these short mics.
I've never had that problem, so.
So my name is Jeb Benson. I'm at 9415 Ingram Street in Candelas. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been to every single of the neighborhood meetings. I've been to every single meeting before the council and the planning commission. And in general, I still am not crazy about the idea, again, like some of our neighbors have echoed. We weren't aware of it. We've documented that the last time we were here, that the builders were not revealing that, what would be done with this land, but that's not the Century's fault. You know, not crazy about the location. Traffic's still a concern, although I've wondered to myself in 2035 with these traffic models, maybe we'll all be in autonomous vehicles by then, so maybe the traffic won't be quite the issue we think it is. All that said, we have gone through quite a process, and I think that their presentation revealed a lot of the negotiation that went on between the neighborhood and the builder. And I think this is probably, with a few minor adjustments, a pretty good deal. A couple things I'd like to recommend that with your facilitation that maybe we could clarify or have sort of put in the, if this goes forward in the agreement. Number one is we do need to clarify the rental restriction. It is that we've talked about this idea that owner would have to, it couldn't be rented for 1 year. We are unclear if that is 1 year after every sale, after every transaction, or just the very first year that that property is deeded. I'm actually thinking that perhaps a better model might be a cap on the total percentage of rentals. That way people could buy initially and rent, but there's some actual limit to the percentage. That might help get some capital into the neighborhood. Just an idea, I don't know what's best, just thinking out loud. Number two, we are concerned about the parking. Obviously, that's been a big issue. They've tried to mitigate that. And the HOA and the board of directors has authority to do things. I've been on HOAs, and it is hard as a board of, on the board of directors. It can be hard when they're your neighbors to enforce certain rules. So I want to make sure that the tax district, Cimarron, Beaumont, whatever other structures we have managing us out there, have ultimate authority, and that if the HOA does not act, that the tax district then has authority to act on behalf of the board of directors, because that can be a delicate balance. So I'd like to clarify that later in the discussion if possible. And then maybe something that would help ease some of my neighbors' concerns would be clarifying whether or not renters would have access to the amenities going forward. In the future, I would like to see, I don't know how we do it here in terms of future ordinances, but I think there's a lot to be said for requiring that builders provide the zoning documentation to prospective buyers at the time of interest, contract, investigation. Again, it's been documented that information we couldn't find that, you couldn't have found that on the Arvada website if you chose to, and certainly the builders were not revealing what was going on there. So I think that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to testify for or against? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment portion, give it back to the applicant for clarifying points, rebuttal, anything else you would like us to consider before we open it up for council questions. You bet.
Excuse me. So there was a lot there. We tried to take copious notes. If I miss anything, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, please feel free to ask me afterwards. A couple of things that I'd like to point out. There was some discussion about the length of our buildings being 6-unit buildings. We have been very conscious adjacent to the public roads. You will notice there are no 6-unit buildings adjacent to the public roads. The 6-unit buildings, and I believe there are 5 of them, and I apologize if I am mistaken, but those are all internal to the project and are not external to the project. There's discussion about parking and whether parking was allocated appropriately throughout the community. We did work with staff, and as we discussed previously, we have, I would hope successfully built single-family attached housing over the last 50 years, and we're very conscientious about the parking. What we believe, if you look at the parking, is the parking has been strategically placed throughout the community so that a guest parking or someone coming to visit the community can actually get to the unit that they're coming into the community for. There was discussion on whether the builders disclosed appropriately to their potential consumers, and I apologize, that's a third-party transaction that I can't speak intelligently on. We, at Century, try to be very deliberate in how we are disclosing and disclose everything, but I can't speak intelligently on a third-party sale, and I apologize for that. I assume Brian Daly is here and would be happy to comment on the fact in Q&A that he had language that said they were supposed to disclose certain things, but I apologize to the consumers in the audience or anyone else. I can't speak intelligently on that. There was a question on how we shown traffic. We're showing traffic as a average per day and not showing it in peak. What we have, and we have a traffic consultant here, what we find is certainly we're within the peak requirements based on your traffic engineers and our traffic engineers' analysis. That's within the requirements of the city of Arvada. There was a question on the amenity centers. I've happened to have built a fair number of master plans in my life and a fair number of amenity centers, and that tends to be a concern that we get. And what ends up happening, and Brian, I'm sure you can jump in on this, what ends up happening is there's a few times a year, 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, those amenity centers, as they're designed Saturday at 10 a.m., they tend to get a lot of use at peak times, not to use traffic as an analysis. And unfortunately, you don't design them for the maximum event. You design them for the nominal event, if you will. I will defer to Brian later on that. One of the last concerns we had was, or that we heard, was rental restrictions. And this is a difficult thing for us to enforce. I will tell you that we have language within our contract as we sell to third-party PSAs that are third parties, if you will, that control whether you can rent and what you can do. And what we're trying to discourage is investors. We don't want to increase the attainable housing within the city of Arvada or within this community. So that is typically enforced within our PSA. Ultimately, we do have other...
What's your PSA?
Purchase and sale agreement with our third-party consumer, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. There was a question on whether the tax district can enforce parking. I'm going to have to defer to Brian Daly on that. Brian, do you want to come up, or is that during Q&A, or how does it work here formally?
If you want to have him make a presentation as part of your rebuttal, that's fine. If not, we'll call him up during questions.
I would probably just prefer to handle it at Q&A. I apologize. I can't speak intelligently on the overall district and what they can do and what they can't do. I suspect that in terms of enforcement and parking, probably has to occur within the HOA or the association for this community. With that, I think I got most of the issues. I'm looking at my team who are nodding their head in unison saying yes. So with that, we will still be here for Q&A, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you for the parties that came up to speak, whether it was for or against this project. As we all know, to make a community, we need that input so that we can get the best possible product out there. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the presentation. I'll open up for City Council questions. Mr. McGough, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just have a couple of questions to, first one is just for clarification. I looked back and didn't find it quickly, so perhaps you can help me. That is, how much open space is required and how much open space is there? The question that came in one of the one of those who spoke to us in the public portion was whether the open space is appropriately placed within the development. But I'd like to just review those numbers. How much is required and how much overall do we have?
Excuse me? Well, I know the percentage. What's required is 20%,
20%
in terms of a percentage.
And
Do you know the actual numbers?
Don't we have like 49%?
Yeah, would you come up here, Randy? So we have 49% overall, 20% is required. We've been very conscientious in how we've placed the open space. I'll let Randy tell you the specific numbers.
Randy Duzan, Stanley Consultants, 8000 Chester Street, Centennial, Colorado, 80112. Actually, the open space requirement for developments in Candelas is met by the master ODP. So all the open space, the common open space, the community parks, is what satisfies the overall requirement. So whatever is provided here is in addition to. So there really wasn't a minimum or a maximum to meet.
Okay, but the percentage within this development is
49%.
49%.
5.2
okay.
acres.
Okay.
5.2 acres.
Does that include the off-site space, that 49%?
That includes pretty much everything outside of a building, outside of the roads. So the 100-foot...
On site?
On site,
You're
yes,
saying
sir.
49% open space on site?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my other question does not have to do with open space, but it does have to do with the rental restrictions. That's somewhat problematic for me. I can envision somebody moving into the development with the express purpose of living there continuously, but then something happens, and whether it's job or family issue, and they need to move out very quickly. Would rental restrictions keep somebody from having a renter come in and help with those payments over the year, or how might that work?
Thank you, Councilmember McGough. And I think as one of the earlier residents pointed out, is it becomes very difficult as you sit on the HOA board to govern these things. And I have personally sat on numerous HOA boards, part of my employment, but I end up doing it personally because I have a passion for what we do, or what I perceive I do for a living. And ultimately, there's what's called as a hardship case. You end up presenting something to the HOA board, and you let the HOA board decide whether, in rental or within other things, whether there's a hardship that warrants that. Now, ultimately for us, what we're trying to restrict is 1 year. So we're trying to discourage investors from purchasing the units, which then drives up the price of the units. They may rent it out because they're trying to cover that mortgage to make your point for a period of time, and that's ultimately what we're trying to discourage. Ultimately, what we find in most of our communities is, I wouldn't want to say that we don't have at equilibrium a normal amount of renters versus owners, but I will tell you that as we've looked back on a lot of our communities, we find, and based on our data collection, I suppose, we find that we're predominantly being a supermajority owner-occupied units. That is north of 75% in the communities that we've looked back on. I don't know that our numbers are infallible, and I'm not trying to misrepresent something to this body, but that is what we've looked at, and we would defer in a large number of cases to our HOA board to govern that, and that's how we would control that.
But it does sound like it may be the intent to discourage, but it'd be very difficult to prohibit.
I think from antitrust and other things, it becomes very difficult long-term to prohibit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Jones, you're next.
Quick question, or well, a few questions. You mentioned a 34-foot flow-to-flow line. Can we go back to that drawing, and can you explain how that works? Because I'm looking at the drawings that we have here, and I'm not seeing that measurement specifically. And maybe I don't understand flow line to flow line.
So the flow line, as you look at this, and I'm not savvy enough as I sit up here to get that to blow up. I don't know if there's someone in the audience that can help us there. Generally, I don't know how to make the magic box work anyway. But so as you look at it up there, you can see called out 17 feet. I don't know if you can see the center line symbol at the top of the crown there. So center line, you're 17 feet to the left, you're 17 feet to the right. The flow line is the bottom of the gutter where the curb face starts, if that makes sense to you, Councilmember Jones and Mr. Mayor. And so ultimately, what we're suggesting is that the normal local section within Candelas proper is actually 28 feet, or where you see 17 on that sheet, you would see a 14, if that makes sense.
So in other words, if you've got a, and we're talking specifically about this private street that runs through
yes, sir,
the development here. So if you've got a car, I just lost my drawing. Anyway, if you got a car parked on either side of the road, 8 foot or so, I guess would be the approximate dimension of a vehicle, you've got really enough room for one car to drive through.
So actually, and we have our traffic engineer in the audience, normally what you see is somewhere around 5 to 6 feet for parking. Normal size cars aren't 8 feet wide.
I have a big truck, so I'm thinking of my truck.
I drive a little dinky car that fits into my garage, but I understand the troubles that you have. Because I had a truck at one point in my life. But ultimately, from a width perspective, they're still not 8 feet wide. I don't want to discourage you from that. But ultimately, when you're looking at 6 feet, you have still an 11-foot driving lane. From an overall traffic flow perspective, that's uniform to standards governed by most everybody. So
Let me
I'll
interrupt on.
jump in here if you disagree with me.
Or if our city folks can tell us, for example, what's the width we have in our parking spots in Old Town or elsewhere?
That's what my question was going to be. What's Old Wadsworth?
Mr. Jones, I'll take a shot at that. Excuse me. We assume on all public streets that the parking lane adjacent to the curb is about 6 feet wide.
Okay.
Okay. Parking stalls on a parking lot are wider because doors are opening up in both directions. But here on the street, we assume the parking lane on the street is 6 feet. If you take a car on either side of that, that's 12 feet, leaving 22 feet for travel lanes on that road. And you can think about, that's a standard width on just about every road we have. In fact, wider than some of the lanes on Ralston Road today, carrying a lot more traffic.
Okay. Thank you. So, and maybe you're the traffic study guy?
Yeah, I agreed with what he said. I think especially for a street of this length and of this traffic level and the fact that it's a relatively minor street within the development, that's plenty wide for the function of it.
No, and I appreciate that.
And for the record, your name and address.
Jeff Hodgson with LSC Transportation Consultants, 545 East Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Thank you.
So before you walk away, it was mentioned that off of Hallett Street there was a 14% impact, and maybe we can go back to your traffic study.
Let me grab my.
Okay, so the highest impact was in 23.5. Now, is this from Dr. Cog, or where did you come up with your highest impact from 2035?
Essentially, most of the site traffic will come out of the development at the southwest access. It's just closest to the state highway intersection where most people are going to want to go. So that's where your numerator comes from. Is basically it's about 600 vehicles a day. And then you take that number and you divide by the, in this case, the longer term build out number of the overall development. I can't read the number there, but it's like 4,000. Yeah, 42.
40?
Yeah, 4240. And then essentially you just divide the site divided by that total to get basically the contribution of this site's traffic to the estimated build-out total traffic on that section of road. So, and that's why it's because the state highway has a lot higher total traffic in the future, 9,000. That's why it's only 4%, because basically the site traffic when it hits the state highway will split, not equally, but it will split either direction. And then so the site traffic is a much lower percentage of the overall traffic on the state highway. So
if I understand this correctly, you're saying that by 2035, approximately 4,815 vehicles will travel into the site, into the Candela's site?
In and out combined. It's on a daily basis.
That's in and out?
In and out, yeah.
Okay.
Both directions, yeah.
And so about a third of that drops off as it gets into that green section? Is that because they're turning into the homes to the west?
For the site traffic, it drops off?
Yeah, so it shows that next graphic shows 2% with about 3,500 vehicles.
Right.
In that darker green.
Because most of the other traffic stays on the road because they're continuing into the rest of the development. But the site traffic, because most of the site traffic uses that southwest access, and most of it's oriented, to and from the south. That's why you have that significant drop in site traffic going north of that southwest access.
Okay, and then this may be a silly question, but I don't see any traffic going around the roundabout. Is that just factored in there somewhere, or is there just no traffic that goes that way?
That's a schematic that shows generally the street lengths. You'd have turning movements going around the circle.
Okay.
I think the schematic just shows, it's just an exhibit to show the relative traffic load. Yeah,
Okay.
You'd have site traffic.
Okay,
going.
and that's what I thought,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
wanted to ask because I'm kind of that way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A couple of other questions. One of the people that talked about their concerns was the parking in the alleys. And obviously it's going to be posted no parking. And maybe this is a question for our city manager, but wouldn't the fire department have authority to tow or move that vehicle at force, or if it were in the way? Destroy it, roll over top of it?
What, you mean if they were responding to an
If they were
emergency?
responding to a fire and there happened to be someone who parked in that no parking zone because they thought they could they would have authority to do really whatever they wanted to that vehicle.
Well, if they needed to get in there for emergency access, I think they would take whatever action they would need to take in order to get in there.
So in other words, they're not going to call a tow truck and
No,
yeah.
no.
I love the pictures I've seen of somebody parked in front of a
Right.
fire hydrant where they've knocked out the windows and put the hose right through.
Well, that was the vision I had when I heard his concern. But I just wanted to make sure that it was on public record that the fire department will take whatever action they possibly can to protect the structures that they've been called to protect. Okay. So, and I was trying to find it in the notes here, but I think in one of the public meetings that you had, it was, I don't know if it was brought up by you or one of the citizens about a traffic light there. And I'm assuming they were speaking of a traffic light at Highway 72 in Hallett. If I remember correctly, the note said that if that were to happen, that would be paid for by the developer. What conversations have you had with the developer specific to the installation of that light?
Well, the developer's here, so I'd invite Brian up to answer that question. I will tell you, Councilmember Jones, that I know as part of our project, we have a decel lane that we are constructing as part of our project that will help with the traffic signal. But with that, I invite Brian Daly to speak to that.
Sure. My name is Brian Daly, 10914 Remick Ridge Road, Parker, Colorado, 80134. I'm with Arvada Residential Partners, the developer of, I guess, what we call the residential portion of Candelas, consisting of this portion of the property and most of the property north of Candelas Boulevard, except for the commercial ends. To answer the question that's been asked, the district that there's a number of districts within the JCMD system, but the Cimarron and the Beaumont districts, which operate this residential portion of the project, have committed to funding sufficient dollars to cover this light. And we've indicated to the builder that we would be responsible for that. We've also worked with the developer on the widening that's just mentioned. We agreed to actually split the cost of that widening to accommodate the additional turn lane on Howlett as it exits onto Highway 72.
And is that something that would have to go through a CDOT process to get approved, or what's the process by which that could be installed?
I'm not absolutely sure of that. That's something we would have to review with our consultants.
What will happen is we'll monitor the intersection for traffic volumes, and at such a point that it meets one of the warrants that CDOT and the city recognizes, we'll contact Mr. Daly and tell him it's time to put the signal in. We'll go through CDOT to get those warrants approved and the traffic study approved, and at that point we do construction plans with Mr. Daly and get them approved by CDOT, and the signal would go in.
Can you give me an example of what a typical warrant looks like?
There's typical warrants for total volume of traffic on a road in the intersecting road, and I don't remember the numbers. Perhaps one of the traffic engineers behind me remembers. There's peak hour warrants, there's pedestrian warrants. Most of our signals meet a peak hour warrant or the total volume in the course of a day where there's opposing traffic, such as Highway 72 in Hallett. So we compare those two volumes. There's thresholds you have to meet on both streets, and if it meets those thresholds, and then the signals meets the warrant.
And the only way to get that light installed is for it to meet a warrant. We can't strong arm CDOT?
We've tried before. It doesn't work.
Okay. It's unfortunate. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to continue that real quick, and I asked Mr. Jones if I can ask more questions. There's a lot of cars turning left on 72nd there. I mean, is that one of the warrants as well? Is traffic safety, not just volume? It should be looked at safety.
Safety is one of the criteria we look at, and if there's a record of crashes or something like that, we take that into consideration.
And how often will we be checking the traffic counts?
Annually, unless we see something happen out there that causes it to happen sooner.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. So I just one more question, and I don't know if it relates to Mr. Benson's question about the enforcement of the parking having served on an HOA myself, I can certainly understand the pain and concern that comes with that. But his request was that Cimarron, or I guess that, I'm not, did I say that right? I'm sorry, had the ultimate authority for the parking enforcement if for some reason the HOA couldn't. What are the thoughts around that?
I don't want to speak for Brian. As you guys know, Brian I don't know the board members that sit on the Cimarron Metro District, but I'm certain that we could figure out something from an enforcement perspective. And some sort of IGA that says that they can help with that, but the ultimate enforcement, or that they can enforce the HOA to do something, but the ultimate enforcement will likely be through the HOA. And ultimately, you'll have many eyes watching this within the HOA. If the neighbors along with the outer neighborhood, along with the inner neighborhood, have concerns with this, Councilmember Jones, I find that many eyes is what correlate to success in any sort of enforcement. But I'll defer. I don't know if you sit on the Cimarron Metro District or not.
I do sit on the Cimarron Metro District Board, but just to clarify, I'm not sure I know what the question was or where that came up. Cimarron does enforce the covenants within the community, and there have been occasions when we have had to have vehicles towed, either vehicles that were sitting on the street that were just parked there in disarray, or we've had to notify homeowners if they're in violation of parking mobile homes there in excess of the amount of time and things like that. Within this project, it would be up to the HOA, not the district, to enforce parking. These are private roads maintained and or owned by the HOA, not the district.
I guess the way I heard the question by Mr. Benson was that he was afraid that if the HOA wasn't able to enforce, who would then they go to?
They would go to the district, so they would make a complaint to the overall district. The district would then address it with the HOA board, similar to a district within the city of Arvada. You may have a representative that comes before this body and says, hey, we have a concern about this or that. I would suspect that it would never escalate to that level, just because when we start to have 104 units, which typically is somewhere around 432 eyes, give or take, because lots of times kids don't pay attention to what's going on around us. We start to have many eyes looking on transgressions, and it just takes a few of those eyes to elevate that to the board. And ultimately, if you have a couple, as anyone who sat on a body where you're looking to take enforcement action, you just need a couple of residents to say, we have a concern about this, and they kind of have an obligation to go address that concern, especially if it's within the CCNRs. But certainly, you would agree that if an overall resident of Candelas or the Cimarron Metro District made a complaint to the Metro District, that Metro District would go address that with the HOA board.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mr. Pfeiffer?
Let's stick on that. I wasn't going to go in that order, but wouldn't the city just be contacted if there was somebody blocking a fire lane? As you know, that's one of my pet peeves in the city. Wouldn't we just call the police and have them just either towed or ticketed right there?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to keep
Yeah,
it simple. It was a lot of
If-
widget talking over
Yeah,
there.
if there's parking that escalates to, a major issue like that, I think you could count on us getting involved in some way, if not directly, at least facilitating those that need to take
Right.
responsibility to take responsibility.
Right. I mean, if you're blocking somebody's garage, I think that the police will move your car if you're blocking somebody that you shouldn't be blocking. So that took care of. So let me start with the applicant. And maybe the city needs to help me with this. The 20% and 49% that they refer to in open space, and maybe it's just, gosh, my 6 years, I didn't realize this, but I'm realizing it now. The 49% seems inflated, but it's 49% of the area is open, and you're including all the alleys, all the sidewalks, all the streets, all the, not open space as we define it as a park.
Not the paved streets. We probably include sidewalks, because
So
it's part of an
concrete.
overall calculation of
Your
the open
alleys.
space,
Your
but not
alleys.
the alleys. Not the alleys or the streets.
Not the alleys and not the
Not the
streets.
alleys or the streets.
Can I just add, the open space count is if you look at everything that's landscaped, that's how we count it. So sidewalks are not counted. So it's the, what they contributed on, within the site is they were required to have 2.1 acres of open space. They provided, that is at 20% of the open space requirement, just for the site, and they ended up having 3.9 acres open space.
Okay.
So
that makes more sense to
yeah.
me than all the other
Yeah.
answers that have been given
And
out.
then also remember that they are part of the overall scheme of Candelas, which
Right.
they have exceeded quite like
Is
almost.
the 49% for
Yeah.
the overall Candelas plan?
It is actually 160% of open space.
Okay, for Candelas
Overall Candelas.
Well, thank you for
You're welcome.
clarifying that. Sticking with the developer right now, you said that you had all detached sidewalks throughout the property, but yet I saw on your drawing right there that the southeast corner is not detached. Will it be detached?
I will defer to our planner. I suspect that will be detached, and this is a,
Well, you said all sidewalks were detached.
I suspect that
is
this
not
is
detached.
detached, and it's just a bad graphic.
Oh, okay.
Are you referring to the sidewalk
adjacent to Halleck?
That goes north
adjacent
and
to the
south.
Halleck where the widening's occurring?
Right.
Yeah,
in front.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that on the plans. It could be a graphic error, but it would be detached, certainly in the FDP.
I think it's
The same as across the street to the west?
Yeah, it should match like the other side of the street.
Correct.
So that will be addressed.
Yes.
And that will be detached.
That will be detached. You can see that there,
Okay.
once we widen it, there'll be a pinch point where the existing monument is, but we'll have something, we'll have some
Okay.
amount of detached
So on the
walkway.
record, you're detaching that sidewalk.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then he got the rest of mine. I just have comments for, or another question for staff. So those flashers for the pedestrian crossing is east of whatever that street is on 94th. If you go back to show where those flashers are being installed.
Assuming that I'm smart enough to work the clicker.
So as he's getting to the, okay, there you go. Do we believe that that is the best place for those flashers? Just the question is left-hand turns, I've learned they don't always seem to do very well for pedestrians. So having that on the left-hand side, I was just curious if that was the right placement for that in front of the school there.
Councilmember Pfeiffer, you're correct about crosswalks in general being on the left-hand side in these kind of T intersections.
Yeah.
In this particular case, the crosswalk is basically has rapid flashing beacons and is activated by a push button, and it's adjacent, closest to the school, so it's part of the walk route, and that's why it was selected to be at the position that it's on at that location.
So, not knowing the school site very clearly of how the kiss-and-go zones or the drop-off zones are, I'm assuming those are on the west side of the street? Because I've learned, all of us having kids, that no one pays attention to any crosswalk around any school. The most important thing is their own kids showing up. So I just want to make sure that safety, as much as we can, planning-wise, that we put in the best place that doesn't cause a conflict with people being dropped off. You still feel that that's the best place for the property?
Given the school zone that's overall being planned for the entire street, it is a good location.
Okay. That's all I just needed to know. And then you got the detached. And then my last, I just have a comment. We should never compare, hey, Mr. Bob Manwaring, we should never compare Ralston Road. That's just a narrow road. It's just absolutely the narrowest road in the entire city. But we'll fix that, right, Bob? The last thing is on the website, Candelas website. A couple things for Brian. I like that you kind of fixed it, because I was the one who made the comments last time. The community brochure doesn't work. so you can't look at the community anymore. But also the builder's guide does not show that this is townhouse. It still shows it's part of Lennar. And it says Builder Guide 2017. So I just want to make sure that you look at that page. Your other page, your interactive map, is showing townhouses, but your actual brochure that shows that it's the Builder's Guide 2017 does not show that. It shows it's still part of Lennar's homes.
We will, it is a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a long one.
And we will be looking at
Okay.
Councilman Pfeiffer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Very good. Mr. Howard?
Question, staff. Would you refresh my memory on the Planning Commission vote?
The Planning Commission vote on the original submittal was 4 for approval and 2 were absent.
Thank you.
Okay, my only question was with regard to the possibility of a crosswalk there at the private road in Hallett. What's staff's theory on that, or is that an appropriate place for a crosswalk or not an appropriate place for a crosswalk?
Mr. Mayor, looking at that location, basically what's happening is that there's a signalized intersection nearby and there's a lot of traffic. It widens out, the Hallett widens out as it gets near State Highway 72. So in the interest of pedestrian safety, we're intentionally not providing a crossing location at that location. There is a crossing location that's safer closer to the to north where the roundabout is located.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there are no other questions. I would entertain a motion. Mr. Jones?
I will make a motion. Before I do that, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So given that Mr. Pfeiffer made the comment about the detached sidewalk, is that a condition of approval, or how do we want to?
Mr. Daly, how do you want to handle that?
You can certainly do that if that's what you want, since
so
there's a question about it.
Right, that's fine.
Okay.
And which one? Which motion should that be made on?
I would make it on the first motion.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I move that Candelas Townhomes Preliminary Development Plan, northeast corner of Hallett and State Highway 72, be approved, subject to the attached updated conditions of approval. This motion is based on the findings of fact and approval criteria on pages 11 and 12 of the staff report. Additionally, that the detached sidewalk will be included in the final development plan.
Okay, motions for approval with the addition as noted. Mr. Pfeiffer, you may speak to the motion.
Yeah, I will speak to the motion. And I don't know if this is the right place, but we're going to do both right now, right?
Right.
So all I ask for you all at Century is your first 2 developments that I've been around, Boyd Pond and West Town. I think that's what that sign popped up looked like. Is hopefully it's a higher quality than what we've seen in the past, and hopefully a better for that area. I haven't been very fond of the development so far, so hopefully you can pick up your game on third time's a charm. But I'll be supporting your motion tonight, giving you your last chance.
All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Okay, Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I move that Candelas Townhome Preliminary Plat, northeast corner of Hallett and State Highway 72, be approved, subject to the attached updated conditions of approval. This motion is based on the findings of fact and approval criteria on pages 13 and 14 of the staff report.
Motions for approval of the preliminary plat. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. That concludes our public hearings for this evening. We'll move back to public comment. If there's any member of the audience that would like to address City Council during the 5-minute limit public comment portion. Yes, Mr. DiGiacomo. Good evening, sir. If you'll state your name and address for the record.
Okay.
My name is Ascenzo Di Giacomo. I'm at 12630 West 66th Place. And I always have trouble with this mic. I'm pleased to be in front of the council again, just talking on something that's very important to me. It's regarding the Reno Design Guidelines update, or Reno Design Guidelines that's coming up in the historic preservation of Old Town. The next public meeting is June 29th. That's a Thursday. I would encourage you all to come to that meeting. It's going to be a very important one as far as somehow with the dynamics of the meeting so far. It's going to be very important. My goal today is to just be here to preserve the historic character of Old Town. That's the ultimate goal of myself and some of the citizens that have been participating in this process for many, many weeks and many years. In the coming weeks, myself and others are concerned about in the coming weeks, myself and other citizens concerned about the preserving the historic character of Reno will make a strong case for the cultural and economic case for preservation. Right now, I think it's really important that the council right now is at a crossroads in this very, very important issue. There's about 90 properties that are being addressed in these guidelines. First of all, just a couple points, and I apologize, I ran out of the house and I had an outline prepared. I had to kind of scratch something together for this, but it might be a little disjointed. I think it's really important to understand the cultural capital of preserving the historic, any historic district anywhere in the country. I think it's important that, I like to use the word when I talk about historic preservation is the legacy. And I think it's not just the legacy of a town and a community and a city, but it's the legacy of all of you and your legacy to provide, to encourage you to provide, to do something and make the right decisions, and so that your legacy can be looked at in a very positive light when it comes to this very important issue. A legacy, as defined by some, is a gift of property after death, a bequest. And with you, I would think it's how you remembered, how have you affected the future of this community. Another issue that's going to be coming up, it's always is discussed in these meetings, is property rights issues. And it's a very important issue because I think what happens is that we get caught up in the current property property owners, and I think that does a disservice to the overall goal of historic preservation. You have to look at the future generations and the physical property that you're trying to preserve. Secondly, and another very important point is we've been going back and forth as far as the ability or the inability to scrap historic properties. This is a really, really key issue when it comes to historic preservation. The safeguards, I believe, must be put in place to ensure that homeowners are discouraged from demolishing these properties. To be creative in these environments, these regulatory environments, we need to produce disincentives as much as incentives to save these properties. So in other words, you write into your guidelines specific articles that say, if you want to destroy this property, then you must put an affordable housing unit on the garage in the back or whatever, but make sure that they understand that it's your goal and your desire to preserve as many of these properties as you can and not demolish them. And your consultants may assist you with this. Norrie Winters, I worked with him almost 20 years ago, and he's a great consultant. You guys have every available tool in front of you to ask the right questions and take these guidelines down that road if you want to make more stringent guidelines. These examples abound in the Denver area, in historic resort towns, and regionally and nationally. That you don't have to go too far to find that there's other communities that are doing this. They're taking a little bit of harder line with regard to historic preservation, and I think it's important that you know that and that you understand that there's an economic viability of preserving the historic old town. What's going to happen in an economic environment like we have right now is that we're going to have spec developers come in, and that's going to be the end of what we know as the nature of Reno Park guidelines. If we don't make more mandatory, more stringent guidelines in this area. And just in a summary, the neighborhood interest and action has helped immensely and was instrumental in getting us to where we are today with the zoning. And I thank you for participating in that and making that happen and working with the staff to do that. And then, that's pretty much it. There must be a political will to craft thoughtful, effective guidelines that protect these historical assets. And I encourage all of you to participate as much as you can. Do your research. There's research out there. Google historic preservation, the value of historic preservation. There's phenomenal articles out there. Strongtowns.org, Historic Preservation, Inc., Congress of New Urbanism, the Urban Land Institute. Have some fun, watch a game, plug in, some of those Google things, and you'll be amazed at what you can find about people that are really, really dedicated, communities that are dedicated to historic preservation. The time is now. We can't let this go away, because this is going to be the first one. And if it was my goal, we would keep moving west, because
Okay, Mr. Giacomo, you're past your 5 minutes. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate them, and it is an important issue that we're going to spend some time on. So
great.
I appreciate your passion on it.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council during public comment? Okay, I'll close that off. Is there any other city council reports that need to be made at this time? I think we covered those all earlier. Mr. Devon, what do you have for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just want to remind you that our next workshop will be on July 24th. That will be a review of the hospitality master plan, and we'll begin our 2018 budget process update with a discussion of our 10-year financial models at that time.
And Mr. Devon, can you give us some sense of when the Reno Park discussion will come back before City Council?
Oh, pardon me, August 14th workshop.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Daly, anything from you? Very good. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank everybody for their input. Everybody have a good evening. We're adjourned.